What's up, guys? So, today I have a Bride Nel guide for you. It's a little late, but, it's whatever. Let's go! Bride Nel is an ace sharpshooter that can increase the party's critical hit chance based on hit count. Her first talent, Crimson Blossom Flurry, increases the party's critical hit chance by 10%, 20%, or 30% based on the hit count. Critical hit chance is actually a pretty common buff for most sharpshooters, but usually that's post-rush, and Bride Nel can actually give this pre-rush, so that's very nice. Her second talent, Sincere Devotion, increases the entire party's critical hit damage by 10%, 20%, or 30%, depending on the hit count. And this one goes hand in hand with her first talent, so if you can get the hit count to 200 hits, which should be pretty easy considering that Nel is also very good at racking the hit count herself. So once you get that hit count up, you should be able to get critical hit chance and critical hit damage, which increases your damage output. Not by a lot, because crits don't really do that much, but it's still extra damage. Her third talent, A Proper Lady, increases the hit count timer by 3 seconds, increases the party's single target damage by 20%, and increases her own attack by 30% while she is charge assaulting. Those extra 3 seconds actually come in handy when you're fighting a very mobile enemy. It helps you keep the rush gain bonus up. And the single target damage, that's kind of her form of damage buffing. Unfortunately, most other defenders also bring single target damage, so most of the time this gets overwritten, but the extra 30% attack during her own charge assault is actually really good for increasing her damage output. And her last talent, Well-Concealed Secrets, gives her anti-flinch of 10% HP or less, reduces her AP cost by 10%, and it also nullifies the enemy's critical hit effect while she is charge assaulting. Unfortunately, none of this stuff is party-wide, but I guess it does help Nel a bit. The anti-flinch can help her with keeping her attacks up. The AP cost reduction helps her with extending her combos a bit, and those nullification of the critical hits during assault charging, that actually pairs well with her third talent, which needs her to be assault charging at all times. And then moving on to her battle skills, first up we have Blooming Shot. Hurl myriad knives at your foe. Its power is determined by multiplying attack by 200%. It does 8 hits and it costs 20 AP. This is a very fast attack that doesn't cost a lot of AP, so you can use this as a combo filler if you want. You can also use it to rack up the hit count because of that 8 hits that it does, and it's also got some decent rush gain. Then secondly, we have Bridal Guillotine. Hurl a sword made of energy at your foe. Its power is determined by multiplying attack by 290%. It does 4 hits and it costs 26 AP. This is also a very fast attack, not quite as fast as Blooming Shot, but it does have a wider AoE and it does have a higher attack multiplier. Plus, you can also use it from range, which means the charge assaulting that you constantly have to be doing is a lot safer, so this is one of Nel's best offensive tools. And then we have Blooming Sword. Bring your foe close and assail them with a spin attack. Its power is determined by multiplying attack by 460%. It does 7 hits and it costs 35 AP. So this is one of her close range attacks, but unfortunately it's very slow, a lot slower than Guillotine, and the fact that you need to be up close makes it a lot more dangerous. It also launches you up into the air, and she doesn't have an air dodge, so she's completely vulnerable while she's up there. Basically, it's not that good of an attack. And then we have Flower Wheel. Hurl a myriad of petals at your foe in a rotating attack. Its power is determined by multiplying attack by 340%. It does 12 hits and it costs 28 AP. And this is her other close range attack, and luckily it's a lot better. It's faster, it does more hits, which means you can use it to rack up the hit count, but again, it's a close range attack, so it's a lot more dangerous, and her normal attacks up close aren't that great either, so only use this if you need to reposition yourself. And then we have her rush, Bouquet of Flowers. Toss 1 flower, causing a whole field to bloom and attack. Its power is determined by multiplying attack by 4000%, and as a post-rush buff, it increases the entire party's attack damage dealt by 40% for 20 seconds. Damage-wise, this rush actually isn't that great. It does have a 4000 multiplier, but Nel's naturally low attack stat means that a lot of our other characters are going to be doing more damage with their rushes, so I would put this about halfway through the chain. However, that post-rush buff is absolutely fantastic. Attack damage dealt is still a very rare buff, and 40% is huge. That's more than most of our other attack damage buffers can even give to the party, so this is a very nice post-rush buff. Now onto her weapons. Being a dagger user, she has access to a lot of good free stuff. So first of all, I recommend the Golden Bolt Destroyers, which imbue your attacks with lightning. They increase damage of Poisonous Guillotine, which doesn't apply here, and at max limit break you unlock the last factor, which increases attack by 10%. And they also have a 471 attack stat at max limit break. So these daggers are good because of their lightning imbuement and because of that last factor, which increases your attack. So if you're going to run these, make sure you have that last factor unlocked. You could also run the Golden Thunderblades, but those are a bit more difficult to limit break, so that's why I recommend these instead. And then for gacha weapons, first of all, I recommend the Bloodstone Protectors, which have a 962 attack stat at max limit break. They imbue your attacks with light, give you an 80-10 guts, and at max limit break, you unlock the last factor, which increases attack damage by 20% when your HP is sitting at 100%. So just like the last pair of daggers, these are good because of their elemental imbuement, and luckily for us, a lot of bosses are weak against light. If you manage to unlock that last factor, which increases your attack damage, that also ups your damage output a little bit, but getting that thing to max limit break is a bit difficult. And then the second pair of gacha daggers I recommend are the Ceremonial Anemones, which have a 964 attack stat at max limit break. They imbue your attacks with earth, they reduce attack damage taken by 15%, and at max limit break you unlock the last factor, which gives you normal attack AP recovery plus 50% when the hit count is at 100 hits or more. Earth weak bosses are a bit more rare compared to light weak bosses, unfortunately, but it still helps with element burst stunning, and if you have this thing at max limit break, that last factor is actually very good for Bride Nel because her AP recovery on normals is not bad. Overall, I would recommend you run the Golden Bolt Destroyers the most because they're free, so they're very simple to get and max limit break. And then for accessories, I recommend the Bunny Hair Clip, which increases attack damage dealt by 20% while you're assault charging and increases the chance of causing stun by 5%. So obviously when you're playing as Bride Nel, you're going to be charge assaulting most of the time, so having extra attack damage dealt is very nice, and the extra chance of causing stun is also good because you're going to be using a lot of elemental daggers. And then for her battle skill setup, first of all I recommend you run Bridal Guillotine because it's very fast, it can do a lot of damage, and you can use it from range, so charge assaulting it is very simple. And then secondly, I recommend Blooming Shot for pretty much the exact same reasons as Bridal Guillotine, except you would use this to build the hit count. And then lastly, I recommend Flower Wheel because you pretty much just need to fill a slot, and you can use this to reposition yourself by charge assaulting. And with this setup, we can create a very simple combo like this: a normal attack into Bridal Guillotine, into Blooming Shot, into as many Bridal Guillotines as you can fit. And also make sure to charge assault all of these attacks because that's where most of your damage comes from. So this combo can be used to do a lot of damage, and seeing as how you can use it from range, it's also very safe. You could also reverse it and put Blooming Shot first and then Guillotine and then another Blooming Shot, and you would use that to build the hit count as well as have some better rush gain. And now for our party. So Bride Nel works best in a team with hit count based characters, so that's what we're going to build our party around. First of all, I recommend Vampire Victor, who gives the party 10% HP recovery on normals. He increases the entire party's damage by 30% and their elemental damage by 10%, and he's also great at racking up the hit count. Post-rush, he also heals the party for a good 40%, and he also increases single target damage, which is something that Bride Nel also does. But aside from that, none of their other talents overlap, which is good. It also means that Bride Nel can recover HP without there needing to be an actual healer present. Victor can also rack up the hit count, which means Nel can reach her critical buff a lot sooner. And seeing as how they're both dagger characters, you can run them against the same bosses and exploit the same weaknesses. And then secondly, I recommend a Bride Reyna. She can buff the entire party's attack by 30%. She gives the entire party 100% AP recovery on normals, and she also has a very rare HP regen buff. 5% HP every 3 seconds when the hit count is at 0, and 10% every 3 seconds when the hit count is at 100 or more. So Bride Reyna is obviously going to buff the attack stat of both Victor and Nel, which makes them do more damage. The AP recovery on normals also pairs very well with Victor's lifesteal. And to top it off, that HP regen also pairs very well with Victor's lifesteal. It basically means that as long as you don't play too risky, you should be able to get by without even needing a healer. And then the only thing that we still need is a character that can actually do a lot of damage. so I recommend a Winter Evelise. She can increase HP for the entire party by 20%. She also buffs single target damage by 20% when the hit count is at 0 or 40% when the hit count is at 150 or more, and like I said, she's also very strong. So Eve's single target damage buff is actually the same amount as Bride Nel's single target damage buff until you reach 150 on the hit count, which should be very easy seeing as how we have both Vampire Victor and Bride Nel, and at that point it goes up to 40% single target damage, which increases everybody's damage output even further. Bride Nel's talent set is actually kind of weird, which means the parties that you can build with her are restricted in many ways. So if you're going to run her, make sure you know what buffs she actually brings to the party and what other characters you need to take advantage of her strengths. So to summarize, Nel is a very fast sharpshooter that has a lot of attacks with some high hit counts, which means she can make the hit count climb like crazy, which works out in her favor because she actually has two buffs that are dependent on the hit count, and they have some high hit count requirements. Aside from that, she also has an attack damage buff on her rush, and it's not just a simple attack damage buff, it's the highest attack damage buff that we currently have in the game, a massive 40%. Now, unfortunately, Nel is a sharpshooter with buffs that don't really synergize well in any party. She ups single target damage for the entire party, but usually that gets overwritten by a defender. She also brings crits, but crits aren't that great for increasing your damage output. If you're playing a sharpshooter, ideally you want them to have some sort of regular damage up, because that's what sharpshooters excel at, and then all of her other talents are just selfish buffs that are supposed to increase her damage output, but her natural damage output is already kind of low, even with those buffs. So Bride Nel, while she does bring a new combination of buffs to the game, there are much better sharpshooters that you can be running. And that's it for my Bride Nel guide. Apparently we're getting Verda and Priestess tomorrow, I think, and I still have two other Bride characters to make guides about, as well as the Awakened characters. I want to do those at some point too, but it's a lot of time I have to spend on this stuff, and plus I need to find actual Awakened copies of those characters to make the guides about them. But I guess I'll figure something out at some point, so hope that was helpful, and I guess I will see you all next time. Peace!